everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all doing well tonight. So I just got back from the theater from seeing Terrifier 2. Now, I'm not the biggest Terrifier fan. I think that the movie is fine for the most part. I really enjoy Art the Clown. I think that he is one of the more iconic horror villains of recent years. Obviously, the brutal kills in Terrifier 1, most notably one featuring a female, is probably one of the more brutal kills that I've seen in horror films also of recent years. I think that the acting, as far as criticisms go, definitely the acting, and while I do like the film's retro style, I think that with the whole modern day that Terrifier 1 was set in, I think that those were the two biggest criticisms that threw me off. But again, I still think that the movie's fine. But yeah, I remember when I first saw Terrifier 1, all I thought was wow, Pennywise might have some fucking competition. And speaking of Pennywise, having a 3-hour part 1 and part 2 film, did I mention that this film has a beefy ass running time of 2 hours and fucking 28 minutes? I mean, sure, it's not 180 minutes, but goddamn, what the fuck? But I was interested, more than not in seeing Terrifier 2. Again, I thought that the first one was fine for the most part. With obviously COVID hitting, Terrifier 2, among, many other horror films, such as A Quiet Place 2 or Saint Maud, this was one of those films that just seemed like it was fucking doomed at this point. It got a shit ton of delays. And I also want to say, I could be wrong here, but I believe that Terrifier 2 was actually funded, whether it was Indiegogo or Kickstarter, so that was obviously, something to take into consideration as well. But when we got the reassurance and the confirmation that this film was going to be releasing in October of this year on the big fucking screen, I was not gonna miss this fucking movie, 2.5 hours or not. So, with all this being said, let's talk about Terrifier 2. So, without spoiling too much right offhand, as far as this introduction goes and introducing Art the Clown onto the big screen, what I will say is that I love when a slasher film or a film, depicting a horror icon, I love when they open a film of theirs with some of the most brutal shit we've seen them do yet. And again, this movie is 2.5 fucking hours. And again, if you've seen Terrifier 1, then you'll know probably what kill in particular I'm talking about when I say that it had one of the gnarliest kills I've seen in, a horror film in recent memory. With saying that, just this film as an opener, just its introduction to this 2.5 hour film, it really does show that this film is going to exceed the first film in literally every fucking way right off the bat. Terrifier 1 really does show us that it was just the introduction for Art the Clown. And going into, Art the Clown, but not only, Art the Clown in the introduction, but even everything from the horror to the comedy to actually Art the Clown as a being, this film sets up right away that it's going to, give us that same demented story, that same level of literal fucking nonsense from the first movie, if not fucking more, which it fucking does. The film also, in its introduction, it also sets up a particular plot point that really caught me off guard that I was not expecting to see at fucking all. But even just showing such a story element, it really, gives the audience that reassurance hey, we're not just going to flesh out this, being more. We're not just going to up the ante of the first film, but we are really going to pack a fucking punch as far as surprises go. And going forward from this introduction now to where we're actually introduced with our main character, Sienna, her background from a character stance as well as, even her home life, immediately felt just so much better than the first film. The first film really does just feel like, a concept idea in comparison to this film as a whole. But basically, simple plot of this, well, what the plot says, which it is more, than just these two as the actual victims, but this teenage girl and her little brother fall victims to Art the Clown as he goes after them on Halloween night. And this idea doesn't sound like anything big, it sounds pretty fucking typical and standard of a, Halloween slasher film. but it actually does go just so much further than that. Again, this is, I will say it probably many times, this is a 2.5-hour film, and I will go as far as to say that this film is basically a 2.5-hour fucking kill count. And as far as, like, without spoiling too much with, this character Sienna and Art the Clown and, her brother, that really is just the last act. I mean, this is our main character, yes, and, there is plenty of involvement with her and her family with Art the Clown, but as far as, like, her being this kind of, character, this kind of final girl that everybody's saying, and this, really just kind of going head-to-head with Art the Clown, this 2.5-hour film is literally just, unlike the first film where, Art the Clown had, like, a certain target where he was just killing people that got in the way of that. He's just going on a 2.5-hour fucking murder spree in Terrifier 2. But no, as a film, you really see just how much they actually want to make Terrifier 2 as a more structured film. As a film for, yes, fans of Art the Clown, fans of, horror brutality, and just, set up an overall fun story arc for this villain, yes, for the fans. Even in the sense where, like, the little brother of this movie, he actually has this, like, demented fixation with Art the Clown at first. Like, he's kind of, like, obsessed with him, even wants to go as him for Halloween. Even setting up, like, some possible plot points where, like, the older sister's even, like, teasing this kid. She's like, what, you think that, like, if you dress up as Art the Clown and he sees you, he's gonna be fine with you, he's gonna have mercy on you? Which actually had me thinking, like, I actually do want to see Art the Clown now just interact with a fucking huge fan. Just, again, this film shows so much care and such a seemingly just standard plot. And even going further now, we even get, some sequences of the film, that are, like, dream sequences where we see, like, props and even potential, like, merch ideas that could, go forward if this film is actually that big of a hit. There are also, plenty of Easter eggs and, just, again, with a film having such a seemingly standard plot, with all dream sequences and shit, they actually were pretty fucking original. This film has a lot of fun with itself. Again, as far as, like, references and Easter eggs go, we see our main character, Sienna, wearing this, like, black and white, like, striped sweater that resembles much of, like, Art the Clown's color and attire. And the overall variety that this film has, and how well, like, the film does with its segments, when you look at it and think about it, it almost is just kind of hard to believe how much bigger this film is in comparison to its predecessor. And while some of the scenes, like, while they are really good for the most part on their own, like whether it's, the dream sequences or, just the random kills going on in the movie, while they do work for the most part as, standalone scenes, when you actually connect them and you actually connect this, massive movie as a whole fucking story, that's where a lot of the criticisms do come in. A lot of things don't feel as concrete or really as structured, but it does still work out fine because the movie still is, for the most part, a set story. And while the film does just kind of go off and have its fun with dream sequences and random fucking kills and even just filler that just, obviously you're like, this movie did not need to be 2.5 hours. In the moment, those scenes still work out very well. Again, there is a variety of this movie that surprisingly works, really well. Now, one thing I do want to bring up is the acting in this film. That was one of my biggest criticisms in the first film, if not my actual biggest criticism of the movie. But much like most of the things in Terrifier 2, the acting in this film is much better than the first films. This still does have, like, plenty of characters that just feel like, your typical low-budget slasher filler characters that, just aren't really, doing much, that kind of feel like, okay, yeah, you kind of deserve a low-budget horror slasher. But one person that in particular that I do want to note is Sienna, our main character. She isn't just good in this movie, but she gives a performance of someone that really deserves a movie of a much bigger budget that could really go to much bigger lengths than just, something like Terrifier 2, a slasher horror film that was, funded by Kickstarter. But as far as, like, some of the bad acting goes, the person that really stood out to me in particular is actually the mother's acting. I couldn't really stand her at all. Every time she was on screen, it just felt really ridiculous, really silly, really unnecessary. Everything that was coming out of her mouth just wasn't really believable, even the way that she was acting towards certain things. And much like, just a lot of the scenes in general, with the characters, when you connect them together and you connect them to certain scenes, they don't really work all that well all the time. But what I do want to mention is that our main character, how she actually, connects with Art the Clown in this story, how that all, ties in and how it all happens. It's not something that feels all that necessary or really all that big. But what I will say is that what I really did enjoy is just how better the writing and how better the character development was, especially in comparison to the predecessors. Just as someone who just falls victim to Art the Clown, her story, intertwining with, whatever's going on with Art in this movie, as well as, more of his story arc, it was just very fun to see. And it made you really care about just both sides of, the characters and overall just the whole story of the film. Now, something I do want to mention that I didn't have an issue with the whole movie, but for the first half, it did kind of get me a little bit concerned because I'm like, this is a 2.5 hour movie. And what I will say regarding all this is the blood and gore in this movie, there is a lot of it. And it gets to the point where it does feel overdone, to the point where you're just like, look, I get it that this is Terrifier. Art the Clown is not some PG-13 horror icon, but goddamn, you need to save some of this. You need to spare some of this shit. Because it was happening, especially in the first act, just every other few minutes, it seemed. And really in scenes where it's just like, save some of this for a bigger scene. Save some of this for a more iconic kill. Come on. But going, forward with, the kills and the blood and gore, what I do want to talk about, yes, is Art the Clown. He is your typical, darkly humorous, sick, demented horror being as he was in the first film. And they definitely have that grow much further in this film. There were some scenes in the first film where he's doing just little fucked up quips and he's just doing these iconic moments that just kind of make us, laugh just because he is this clown and he's, this sick demented person, this thing, doing this shit. And I will say, yes, they upped that ante much more in this film. We see him interacting in places such as schools and Halloween shops, in a fucking fun house, and much more environments that I'm not going to, spoil. But it was always fun to watch for horror fans and fans of Art the Clown. And when we really start seeing, Art the Clown in this film, as an actual menace and just racking up this kill count, I will say that there were some kills in here that I would have never fathomed, even as a horror fan or as someone who's seen many horror films and many slasher films. Like, there was some shit in here where I'm just like, not only how did you get this shit in the fucking film, but how did you get this shit in the film on top of all the other shit? And how did you even come up with such a kill? Like, there was some shit in here, some kills that I have literally never seen in any other fucking movie. And with saying that, the execution of these kills, along with even the acting from, the victims, there is a lot of good, acting to it, but there are a lot of, acting and a lot of performances that do feel, low budget, like this film is. And again, a lot of, those times it is just filler. And, again, with this being a 2.5 hour film, you do really feel a lot of that. While, it is always a fun sight to see Art the Clown on, screen. And that they're just doing this, juggernaut of a film to really showcase Art the Clown, because they actually have that opportunity from the success of the first film and whatnot. A lot of the filler and a lot of just the, characters just in between the actual story, it does get tedious to a point. And again, there are, a couple particular plot points that are very interesting. There is even one involving this, entity, this kind of, spirit. But again, as far as the protagonist in this film, the main protagonist, setting up, her character, the way that they did it in the fashion, it does feel kind of gimmicky. And again, it doesn't feel necessary or needed. And it does, you do definitely get that feeling of, shit is just way too long at times. But again, the film does have a lot of variety, from the dream sequences to Art the Clown's antics and kills and building on his, story arc. The film had a lot of ideas and it went for fucking all of them. And again, a lot of these kills in this movie, a lot of the brutality in this movie, there is a lot of it, and it does go down a lot of routes that, again, I don't know how this film was able to get away with some of this shit. Where you think about the most iconic, killing in the first movie, yeah, that ain't shit compared to this movie. And now getting to the last act, which I won't talk too much about, but what I will say is that this film does kind of mislead audiences. Where it is just, where it is just kind of setting up like, oh yeah, it's just this, teenage girl and her little brother on a Halloween night just being, hunted down by Art the Clown. That, again, is not at all what this film is. But what I will say is that, director Damien Leone, before this film's even, release, while it was still in production, he has said that he has ideas to make, I think it was like a Terrifier 3 and a Terrifier 4, maybe even more films, depending on the success of Terrifier 2. And I will say that throughout this entire 2.5-hour film, I was genuinely excited about that. Like, again, up until like maybe the ending. And when I say ending, I mean the actual climax and conclusion to this film. I was like, yeah, I need more Terrifier. Terrifier 3, Terrifier 4, I'm going to be there day one. But I will go as far as to say, guys, that the final closer for this movie, I don't know how I fucking felt about it. It's very strange. It doesn't feel concrete. I don't know where they're going with it. I will stick around to see what happens with it, but I will say from how I was feeling about this movie, it dropped it significantly for me. But as a final act, as far as, especially like this sister and her little brother goes with, going against Art the Clown, I will say that there were things that I was really, interested in seeing, that I was really surprised. We see some genuine emotion from Art the Clown where things happen and things escalate, where we actually see some genuine fucking anger from Art the Clown, something that we haven't really seen. We've just kind of seen him, tormenting people and just being really, gleeful about it and just, being a sick fuck. And I will say, like, things happen where we see, again, a certain emotion out of Art where I was just like, okay, so as far as story arc goes, actually fleshing out this dude's mentality, that was something I'm really excited to see in future films. But what it comes down to, guys, is just the absolute absurdity of this film as a whole is actually just fucking unbelievable. And overall, I'm going to give Terrifier 2 a 4.2 out of 10 with an overall positive review. It is a better film than the first one. It is not a great film. It is not the best it could be. But for a 2.5-hour sequel, slasher sequel, and a low budget one at that, it does most things really fucking well. The biggest thing absolutely is, while it is a low budget film, you are going to get low budget actors. And while this is a 2.5-hour film, you are going to get a lot of unnecessary filler. The ending, again, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't know if I've been this mixed on an ending in a long fucking time. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of Terrifier 2. I hope that you guys have seen this at this point, because this film, it is a wide release, but it is still a low-budget film that was funded, by Kickstarter and shit. So it is not playing at every theater, and it is kind of switching pretty fast as far as, from theater to theater goes. And seeing Art the Clown in an actual theater this time, it was a fucking sight to see. So I hope you guys enjoyed the movie. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. And let me know what you guys thought about it. I will see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys are having a great one. Take care, guys.